All right, what's going on, fellas? For whatever reason, I woke up today. I woke up kind of having a bad day. And it's kind of central to my philosophies of strength should be physical and mental, that it's never too late to just choose to have a good day, to turn it around, right? Even if it's just a little before you go to bed. It's never too late to make that pivot, exercise your control over your own emotions, and just choose to have a good day. So thankfully, I remembered that little mantra before I even came out to the gym. So I put down my pre-workout meal and just listen to some videos I like on YouTube to just kind of get my head in the right space. And we're going to come out here and we are going to succeed. Even if it requires modification on the day, we're going to figure out how to make this session into a win. So I just went through, I did my single leg calf raises, which those of you who follow know anytime I squat, I do calf raises just because I do have a history of injuries to my ankles. And as long as I'm training my calves regularly, those injuries stay away. So one day I do like standing calf raises with the SSB up on a block, and then the other day, just for the sake of variety and keeping things interesting, I do single leg calf raises with a dumbbell in my hand. So I did those. As always, I supersetted my calf raises with my mobility work that I like to run through before I do any squatting variation, make sure my bar path is nice and crisp and I'm moving in the way that I like. I did some front planks just to get my bracing kind of ready for the day. Did some back extensions because I do back extensions before I do any lifting just about ever. And then I've been including some Copenhagen planks recently, which is just a side plank with your leg up on a bench to challenge your adductor, because those have felt like they've been helping my yoke carries. There's a couple of ways you can lose stability on a yoke. One of the most common ones is like your upper back being loose. Then moving down the chain a little bit, you could have a poor brace and you could be losing your power through that midsection. And then kind of the third major area you could be losing stability and starting to get the yoke to wobble on you is a lack of stability at the hips. And I find that lots of power lifters who have built up a big squat have the ability to create enough tension in their upper back, and they have the ability to create a good brace. Some guys lack the endurance to maintain that brace for a yoke carry that lasts any duration, but the most frequent thing I see with guys who have a big squat who start getting into yoke is that their hips are just wobbling around under them because they don't have that like antagonistic adductor, hip flexor, glute, abductor strength to, as they're on one leg at a time, stabilize those heavy loads because they've always been training on two legs at once. So to kind of catch up that deficit, obviously the most important thing to do is to train the yoke and it'll catch up, right? The best way to get better at any task is to do that task. But some supplemental work I've been having success with is just the inclusion of more split squats. If you're a strongman and you're gonna be on one leg all the time, split squats are your best friend. They're no fun, but I promise you they're worth hammering away on a weekly basis. And then also these Copenhagen planks have been really helpful. So just doing a little bit every day. If there's an exercise I can recover from and do daily, I prefer to do it daily rather than doing a million sets on one day and waiting a week to do it again. I've always felt that I just gain more benefits from a strength training perspective doing it daily if it's something that can be recovered from. So today, I think this is the final week of doing any meaningful weight at all on front squats prior to deadlifts. This is my main deadlift day with some secondary squatting. Just been doing pause front squats on this day. Just continue building up that front squat position. I'm gonna tailor it back because today's main work on the conventional deadlift is supposed to be pretty heavy. I don't want the front squats taking anything out of me, so we're not gonna work up to like a tough work set on the pause fronts. I think what we're gonna start doing is start trialing out what we're doing next training cycle for the secondary day. And I'm gonna be running through the Travis Mash front squat program. Those of you familiar would know it's a 9-week front squat program written by American weightlifting coach Travis Mash. It was written up for one of his athletes. And it basically is just the principle of working up to a top single with this really long pause at the bottom, stand up, do this really long pause in the top position, re-rack it, and then you take percentage-based back downs of 3 sets of 3 based off of that top single. So very low volume with these very long pauses. And it's written for someone who has like a lagging like spinal erector strength holding back their front squat, i.e. me, to develop more strength and familiarity just holding weights in that front rack position. So certainly could could work well for me. It's frequently used by lots of strongmen as just like a training cycle that they can run through to help develop their front squat. I think that the program is written assuming you're doing high bar squats on another day to make sure that you're getting in adequate volume to continue developing your leg strength, because I don't think this long pause front squat program is phenomenal for developing leg strength. I think it's a lot better for catching your back up if it's lagging behind your leg strength, which is kind of where I'm at right now. So I figured it could be fun. I know a lot of strongmen that I've talked to just will run through this maybe once a year, just as a quick progression that they like to use. It's 9 weeks long. My training cycles are 10 weeks long, so it fits perfectly. Run through the 9-week training cycle, test a pause single at the end. Should be a bit of fun. Because I'm new to front squatting, or it's been years since I last pushed them, there's easy gains to be made. This training cycle, I've added 40 pounds to my best double on the front squats, just doing front squats again. My best back squat is 730, and my best front squat is 525. So I've still got a ways to go to catch up. So I think anything, as long as I'm working hard, is going to continue to develop my front squat, which kind of gives me the flexibility to have some fun and try out the Travis Mash front squat program, because that's something I've actually programmed for a couple of my guys, namely my strongman guys, with a lot of success, just because I've heard it from coaches I respect. And I figured this would be a good opportunity to use it myself, because I don't really like programming things I don't have firsthand experience with. Just because I think there's aspects of a program or a motion that you can only truly understand having gone through the process of performing it, progressing it, and recovering from it. It gives you like a level of understanding that I don't think could be gotten just from reading about it or whatever. Not just my personal experience with it. So I figured it'd be a good opportunity to keep driving up my front squat, which is a helpful motion for strongman, but also give me an opportunity to try something new. So I don't have it in front of me, so if I'm fucking this up, I'm gonna look a little silly, but I don't think I am. In the Travis Mash front squat program, you get a pause at the bottom, a pause at the top, and then you're instructed to work up to roughly a 1 rep max, which is a common protocol for weightlifting programs, is to work up to a top single for the day, and then auto-regulate the back downs by using percentages of that training max for the day. It says 1 rep max. Usually it's implied, especially within weightlifting, that that's the most you can do with minimal form breakdown, right? It's not just the most weight you can move from point A to point B and have it still count as a squat. It's specifically like, what is your technical 1 rep max? I'm definitely gonna kind of use that term loosely, because I don't want these to be eating into my front squats, into my deadlifts too much, because ultimately a deadlift is a higher priority for strongman than the front squat is. So doing enough to get better at the front squats, but not necessarily as much as I could possibly do, because I do the deadlifts afterward and I don't want it to mess with it too much. Today especially, Jesus Christ, we're not going anywhere near max. We're just having some fun, starting to get used to these long pause durations, and moving not a whole lot of weight at all, because we're getting into the final weeks of this training cycle and the deadlift weights are getting heavier and heavier, and I want to maximize my chances of success on that main motion. Next week I actually basically drop off the front squats. I'll still probably do like a 2-plate 3x3, just because it's an easy way to get my lower body moving before I go on to deadlifts. But yeah, we're gonna have fun. So I mentioned earlier, front squat has gone up a considerable amount this training cycle. A little frustrated because I'm still having those same issues with passing out, which I thought the heavy front rack holds would be a surefire way to remedy it, which it hasn't. That's still the limiting factor before my back strength or my leg strength. So that's kind of one of the reasons I'm messing around with the Travis Mash front squat program. Is clearly what I'm doing is enough to get stronger, but it might not be the most well-selected way to get stronger, because it doesn't seem to be alleviating that limiting factor. And the other things I'm gonna look at is more technical. In the past, when I was able to front rack, I had the same issue when I front racked or cross gripped or strap gripped. So it seems to happen independent of the grip. Usually when this is happening, one of the first things we would look to is making sure that bar is actually sitting in the right position. If it's pressed up against your neck, you're effectively putting yourself in a blood choke. I think it's the carotid artery that it would cut off, and that's why you're going out. It's actually not shifts in blood pressure necessarily. It could just be that blood flow to your brain getting shut off. But I'm fairly confident I have the bar in the right position, especially given that I've been doing like 7-plate front rack holds. It's definitely sitting in the right spot. But I am gonna work on getting my front rack back sooner or later, because that is just a valuable skill to have for strongman, especially for the axle clean and press. Being able to front rack the axle is a tremendous advantage, because when you pop it from the top of your gut up, you only have to make it to shoulder height. Whereas if you're someone who can't front rack and it's floating up high, you have to generate even more height to catch it up there, which is just a massive pain in the ass. So definitely will be looking to get my ability to front rack back for push pressing and axle anyway. I've just been putting it off because in the amount of mobility I would have to do at this point, I like to try to excuse myself and say there aren't many people who can bench 560 with a nice front rack, though that's probably just a cope. But working my way back into that mobility, there's gonna be a little discomfort that's gonna come with it, because I'm gonna have to kind of really work hard on that mobility, maybe overdo it a little bit, have to deal with a little nerve pain in my arms and my shoulders. So I've been putting it off till I finish up my heavy lifting for this training cycle before I start working on that. But eventually, who knows, maybe I'll be able to front rack my front squats again, because that feels a lot stronger when I was able to do it. But the other thing I noticed looking around, I was looked for the guys who have the biggest front squats in a cross grip. And what I noticed is that they're not doing what a lot of people coach for beginners, which is a very exaggerated high elbow position. If you look at 2 of the biggest front squats ever done, they were actually both done by powerlifters with a cross grip. Jeza Uepa, I believe, did 400 kilos, so 880. And then Derek Kendall. If you don't know who Derek Kendall is, pause this video and look him up if you want some inspiration of a big guy moving a big weights for a lot of reps. Fucking insane. He was kind of the man way back when I was newer to lifting, and I'd watch his videos, and he hit like 600 for 13 on a front squat. And part of it is because he's fucking massive, so his shoulders are so big, he can get away with it. But I've also noticed that a lot of these guys, there's a little bit of a correlation. They all have big shoulders, so they can get away with it. But they have actually a much lower elbow position and rely on how big their delts are to kind of get away with that elbows, not even being like parallel to the floor, but being slightly below. And I've been playing around with it, and I noticed that my tendency towards passing out is less bad when I use that slightly lower elbow position as opposed to a slightly above parallel or even a parallel. So I figure with heavy weights, I could be rolling that bar back into myself. So while I'm unracking it in the right spot, there's a backwards impulse from my elbows being so high that it's kind of on a slope that maybe it is rolling back and cutting off my blood flow. So that's something I'm gonna work on, is keeping a high look point, keeping a nice extended thoracic spine, but not driving the elbows up as high, and see how that works. Because I do not have Derek Kendall sized delts, because he did a seated 500-pound military press, but I've done a 375 overhead press, so I probably have big enough delts to get away with a little lower than what I'm doing. So we'll see if that helps. Okay, so on to deadlifts. Worked up to just 275 for the 7 count at the bottom, 15 count at the top. Single, that felt super easy. Definitely what I was looking for today, of just starting to get a feel for what that motion is even like with those crazy long pauses, and using pause duration to make a set difficult rather than repetitions. Historically, just the way I've always trained, the way I've coached most of my athletes, we are going to use repetitions to make a sub-maximal weight challenging, rather than using like crazy long pause durations, especially because I think on a lot of lifts, using really long pauses to make a sub-maximal weight difficult rather than repetitions leads to people just being really lazy with how they're pausing it. So perfect example would be like bench. People are just gonna rest it on their chest, relax, kind of cave, lose their back tightness, hang out until the pause is done and then shove it. And you can cue people over and over to stop doing that, but I just find so many people have a tendency towards it. I usually won't use like ultra long pauses on the bench as a variation. We'll use long pauses, so like significantly longer than what is expected in a competition, just to get you ready for a worst case scenario on the platform. But like crazy long pauses, not something I've done a lot of. So today was really interesting. The 275 felt awesome, nice and smooth. As programmed, I backed off to 80% of that top single, which is just 2 plates, for a 3x3 with the same pauses, which means each set is over a minute of pausing. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know 2 plates could feel that hard on anything anymore. That just took for fucking ever. I probably will only include one of the back off sets because I'm sure that's boring as hell to watch, but goddamn, I was not expecting to like be kind of uncomfortable with 2 plates by the end of those triples. So definitely very interesting and different than training I've done in the past. So it's pretty fun. And like I said, there's certain lifts I would not use long pause durations to make the lift difficult because I just don't think it's training what is likely the limiting factor, but it does kind of make sense when we talk about it in the perspective of a front squat, because many people are going to be limited in a front squat via their spinal erectors, their like thoracic extension, rather than their legs. So it almost makes sense to take a weight and make the set difficult by running up the time under tension for that limiting factor rather than using repetitions, though obviously both work for getting stronger. Conceptually, it does make sense. Looking forward to mess around with the next training cycle and see how that goes. Okay, so top set went well. Took my grip out slightly because I felt like with the narrower grip, I was unable to engage my upper back to kind of lock in my position. And I was forced to pull more with my spinal erectors than I would like to. So I brought the grip out. Net positive, got that set done. I'm gonna guess at some point in time I've done 700 or 705 for 3. But since training out in the garage and moving here, I can say with confidence, it's the most I've done for a triple. I hit 730 double last training cycle, which if all goes well, we will chip that as well. And hopefully that will set me up for an 810 pull this training cycle. If not this training cycle, next one, I don't really worry about those things as long as I feel like I'm moving forward at a reasonable clip. Hard work is seldom wasted, right? So if you put in a great training cycle, you break all these rep PRs, but you really fumble the bag at the end and you fail to chip your PR, it's not as though you didn't get stronger. You failed to express it, or maybe there's something wrong with your program and your fatigue management that made it so you were unable to express all that potential strength that you built. So you just take a look, you're like, okay, well the first 6 weeks of 10 was awesome. Clearly things were good up until that final 4 weeks. What do I have to change next time? So that way I can use that first 6 weeks again, but then capitalize on it better, rather than scrapping the whole thing just because it went bad at the last second. Just figure out why. Normally, I would do 1 or 2 sets off of the blocks now for some additional deadlifting volume, to make it a little easier on my low back to recover from, but get it a little extra volume, because the weights are getting heavy now. My training intuition tells me it'd probably be better to move on, rather than doing additional pulling, because I think that top set was plenty stimulatory. So now we are going to move on, and I'm gonna run through just a regular full deadlift accessory workout. The way I like to structure kind of a deadlift accessory workout, which can be done on a separate day from deadlifts or after deadlifts, depending on your training economy, is I like to do 5 working sets of ab exercise of choice, spread through all the accessories so you don't have to do them all back to back because it's boring. I like to do 3 to 4 sets of a horizontal pulling motion. So we're gonna train the upper back in a shortened position, and then 3 to 4 sets of a vertical pulling motion. So then we're training the lats in a stretch position, and then we're gonna take that same principle and then we're gonna apply it to the posterior chain. So we're gonna do some kind of hamstring curl, seated, lying, glute ham raise, assisted Nordics, something like that. So train the hamstrings in a shortened position, and then we do some kind of hip hinge, like a back extension, 45-degree back extension, reverse hyper, even dumbbell RDLs, to train the hamstrings in a stretched position. So same principle applied to the back and the hamstrings. 1 exercise, 3 to 4 sets, training in a shortened position, 1 in a long position, and then you switch to the other one. Depending on the person, I will usually switch the ordering of the back and the hamstrings based on what I perceive to be the weakness, right? So if I've got someone who, they kind of got that Johnny Bravo build, they've got a huge upper back, legs look even just visually like they're lagging behind. They kind of have the symptoms of their deadlift of someone who's doing a lot of the work with their upper body and their lower body lags behind. We might do that pairing of hamstring exercises first, because we got a little bit more energy, and then hit the upper back work second, because that's already a strength and we just need to make sure that we keep it up, whereas we're really trying to catch up the posterior chain. I myself am in the reverse of that, where my lower body is pretty strong. A lot of that's just due to how I'm built, but the upper back might lag behind, so we're gonna do that first.